Dave Grohl, Taylor Hawkins from the Foo Fighters. How are you?
Good morning.
Great.
Great to see you after last night's effort.
Yep. What did we do? Oh, we just played the record.
Yeah, that's it. Well, when you came in, you mentioned that you would be the last guy standing at the bar, and I thought that was like you come in, shake a few hands, but you literally were the last guy standing at the bar.
We lasted a long time there last night.
Some dude came up to me. Yeah, well, we were the last ones to leave.
Yeah,
of course.
Imagine that.
It's like my wife was there. My wife's like that. She's the last one to leave.
There you go.
Every party. But there was some guy came up to me when we were in there, and he goes, why are you here? You don't need to be here.
Really?
Yeah, he was kind of smarmy a little bit. He wasn't
Wow.
being a jerk, but he kind of was a little bit like, you don't need to be here. Why are you here? I'm like, because we like these people.
Sure.
We're friends with the record
It's
company.
the weirdest thing ever,
They're
right?
cool, and we're having a good time. Does it look like Dave's having a bad time right now?
Maybe it was the bar.
I'm behind the bar
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the bottle of tequila.
Maybe it was the guy buying the drinks that had to pay for it. At the
I
end of
don't
the
know.
night.
Yeah, maybe it was him. Like, can you guys please stop?
Well, I enjoyed listening to the album. I thought it was excellent. I thought it was, now, correct me if I'm wrong here, this album was recorded digitally, is that right?
Well, it was sort of both. It was
Right.
like we used the producer Greg Kurstin. He likes to work with this program called Logic.
Yep.
So he was running Logic, and we would record to tape, and then he would put it into Logic. And if we were doing any sort of like sonic manipulation, like taking a bass line and turning it from a bass sound into like a 747 jet sound.
Yep.
Like he was doing stuff like that, which
Right.
we'd never really done before. So it was exciting.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, obviously, the last two records before we kind of had been preaching the, the analog way.
Yeah, of course.
Because I think in the end, for us, more than just the sound of analog, the thing that I like about analog is it keeps you sort of honest
Of course,
in your performances. So I don't think there was too much of that kind of manipulation going on with.
No,
the,
well,
with
to
the
me, it
computers.
sounded
It's-
more like an analog
Well,
album
the
than
funny
the
is,
previous two.
when I played it for my friends the first time, they're like, "That's really '70s sounding." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, the last two records should have been more '70s sounding
Yeah.
than this one." But
It
there's
sounded like you
just-
played it live, predominantly in the studio.
Yeah, well, one of the things when we first started talking about making the record, one of the priorities was that we wanted to go somewhere sonically that we'd never been without, changing the sound of the band. We just wanted to make it bigger.
Yep.
So we got this engineer, this guy named Daryl Thorpe, who'd worked with Radiohead and Beck and Paul McCartney. He's a genius. He's brilliant. He's a great engineer. And then the producer, Greg, Greg is like known for all of the pop stuff that he's done.
Sure.
But I just met him by chance and we became friends, and I didn't realize he was such a huge producer. But we talked about music for years, and I realized that he's a jazz musician
Right.
who grew up playing jazz, but also listening to rock and roll and punk rock and lots of different types of music. But I think because he's like a jazz guy, he really appreciates the moment in music,
Right.
and getting outside and doing stuff that's unexpected and improvisational. And so when we were tracking, like there were a lot of weird little inconsistencies and things that we left in because it really sounds like us,
Sure.
And so that's really always been our priority when making a record, was like, it just got to sound like us.
Yeah.
We don't like it when it starts sounding like auto-tuning
Yeah, of
vocals
course,
and
yeah.
things like that. We just really
Well, I
wanted
didn't
to
get a
sound
sense
it.
of that from what I heard on the
Yeah,
album
it
at
turned
all,
out it turned out like it sounds natural.
Yeah, and you almost have a feel of some kind of a fusion going on there as well that you may have done in the studio, where there was
Yeah.
a lot of experimental stuff.
Well,
that was
there's
going
just so much you can do sonically
Yeah.
in these programs like Logic that are just mind-bending. They
Yeah.
really are. It really is. I mean, we kind of hadn't been there in 8 years.
Yeah.
Which was good for us, We really wanted to, where we'd been before, but now we wanted to go somewhere new, as Dave said, and they would show us shit that they can do. Can I say shit? Sorry. Stuff they can do, and it was pretty mind-bending.
But there is a throwback to almost a 70s lo-fi sound to this.
A good example actually is there's this one song. Oh, it didn't make it to the record. There's a song called Soldier that's going to come out. We're going to release it another way, but I really wanted to have this 10cc vocal style to it, right? And
Not,
so
a
that
Modern Love kind of thing.
yeah. And so do you know how they did that?
Was it multi-tracking?
They were multi-tracking vocals, but what they did, this is kind of technical, but for each fader, they sang a different note, right? So say there's 10 faders.
One going,
Yeah.
How'd it go?
Sorry.
So, so each fader has a different note, right?
Yeah.
And so they rode they would ride the faders up and down, almost like playing a keyboard, right?
Yeah.
So you're pushing faders up and down to create chords because each fader has a different note. Well, I watched Greg. I said I want to do something like that, and I watched Greg do that on a computer where I sang 10 notes, and he was riding these faders on a computer with a mouse, like basically riding them up and down and writing the moves on it. And I'd never seen anything like that before. And at the end of, like, when he was finished, he really did achieve that crazy 10cc sound. So it does sound like this crazy 70s thing that I watched him do in this program called Logic, where he was just writing all this stuff up. It was crazy.
Well, given
So
the
cool.
digital component of that as well, you wouldn't have got the phasing that you would have got on analog too, because, you know, the difficulty of that, of course, is you've got the phasing, it's sort of flanging
Yeah,
left
man.
or right, all that shit
Yeah.
that goes on. So given Greg's pedigree as a pop producer, the fact that Josh Homme with Queens of the Stone Age went in the studio with, you know, Mike Ronson, and that sounded like what I guess I expected that to sound like. This isn't a pop tinged album, except for perhaps one or two tracks.
Yeah.
I mean, this is full on Foo Fighters.
I think so. I mean, it really started with us just in a room, like writing the songs before we went to the studio.
Yeah.
You know, I'd come up with some ideas and then send them to the guys, and then we went to this other rehearsal space studio thing and started working it out. And when we do it in a room, it sounds like the band, you know.
The arrangements came from us.
Yeah.
They didn't come. Greg, I mean, I thought Greg was going to be more heavy-handed
So
in
did I.
that way. Maybe at some point we were like, hey, you know, hit us or something. You know?
Yeah, of course.
Tell us we're doing something wrong.
Well, that's the thing. Like we would, I'd show him something and be like, "Check this out," and he'd go, "Yeah, that's great. I love it." I'm like, "Cool." So then we'd record it and be like, "Sounds great." I'm like, "Okay," and then I'd do a vocal and he'd say, "Oh, it's just, I really like it a lot." And I'm like, "Dude, give me some of that Adele shit." You know, like, what am I doing? Tell me what I'm doing
What
right
a
now.
goddamn hit here, man.
Yeah,
What the
come on,
fuck?
Greg.
Give me some more octaves, man.
But it was cool because also, you know, he'd never made like a hard rock record
Yeah.
before. So and he grew up listening to that type of music, and he's entirely capable of doing it. But we were really the first time that he'd gone into the studio with a rock band for like 4 months. Because usually when he makes records, an artist will come in and Greg will say, "Okay, well, like, what's your idea?" And the person will say, "Oh, I have this melody." He goes, da 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 da, and I think the words are blah blah blah. Yeah. And so, and he'll say, like, "Okay, go finish up the lyrics." He'll build the track. The person will come in and sing it, and by the end of the afternoon, he's got like a #1 hit. Like,
Well, yeah.
That's kind of what Greg does.
He can play every instrument,
Yeah.
you know. And he's not like, you know, Buddy Rich on the drums, but he can go in there and do a
Maybe
simple
he
drum
wanted
track.
to make the album, and you guys were superfluous to the whole
Well,
thing.
yeah,
you know?
maybe
he should have put
maybe
the
he
album
did.
out, you know?
Maybe we'd leave and he'd be
We'd
like,
leave and he'd redo everything.
Yeah,
Totally.
the album will come out. There'll be
actually
nothing
great.
of you guys on there.
But it's funny. I mean, also the Mark Ronson thing with Queens, like that was totally a coincidence.
Yeah.
And they wound up next door to us, so they were recording like 100 yards away.
Yeah.
So every day we'd see each other, and we're like, we'd steal each other's donuts and smoke each other's cigarettes and drink each other's coffee, and we'd hang out all day long, as we've got these like crazy huge pop producers recording our heavy rock records.
Yeah.
You know.
But
It
that's
was
the future,
really
though,
fun.
anyway. I mean, you've got to change the parameters, otherwise you're
think
going to end
so.
up with the same, you know.
Well, we've also been we've been a band for 22 years. Queens has been around about the same, long time.
Yeah.
And then, like, you get to the point where you just, in order to stay alive and just to maintain some sort of longevity, you have to,
keep swimming up straight.
yeah, you got to like
But without losing
challenge
your
yourself.
signature sound, though, at the same time.
Well,
That's the most important
Greg
part.
would have never happened if they didn't meet as friends.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the way the Foo Fighters work on a lot of levels, anyways.
Sure.
And
We're not smart enough to make career decisions.
no,
we just kind of fall in our lap.
We just kind of truly.
I know, I'm not kidding. It's absolutely
Truly,
true.
I mean, I don't know who would have produced it had you not met him in Hawaii, because you wouldn't have been like, I want to get the guy from Adele. I know
Yeah.
you wouldn't have. Like, you.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong.
Did you hear hello?
Yeah.
We got to get that
That
guy.
has nothing to do with it.
No. Well, thank God for that. I want to talk to you about some of the tracks that I heard, albeit through the speaker system in the club.
That's the only
last
way
night.
you've heard it.
Yeah, so far. Yeah,
Oh, right.
along with some smarmy guy going, "Why are they here?" You know. Like, there was one track in particular, and it may have been the fourth track off the album, that sounded very raw power. It sounded very Stooges.
Oh, yeah,
La-di-da.
la-di-da.
Tell me the
Kind of
story
like
behind that.
Stooges meets Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, because it had the sort of
guess
almost
so, huh?
distortion feel about it.
Which is what we've been trying to achieve.
You know, I remember coming up with that riff in my head as I was driving, like back from taking my kids to the bus stop or something weird like that. But I was humming it like dun 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 dun, and the drum beat on it is kind of sideways. It's like dun 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 dun, and I hummed it into my phone. And that's sometimes what I'll do is I'll like hit the little like voice notes thing on my phone and I'll just hum these stupid riffs. I've got a million of them and it sounds so weird to hear me going like, na, 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 you know, and so, but I just imagined that it would be kind of like a cool, like have this swingy sort of groove to it, you know, but also be heavy as fuck.
Well, it is. It's full on. Like it sounds like Iggy's gone there and turned everything up to 11.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's another thing with Greg, which was funny, is we were like, you know, we'd say, you know, I want this to be really like trashy and noisy.
Yeah.
And I sort of felt like we had to push him in that direction. And then he'd go like, oh, okay. And he'd set it up to the point where it's like, it was so fucking noisy. I'm like, no, dude. Dial it back a little bit. Like, I know you're the fucking like
it's not Aphex
Adele
Twins
guy or whatever. But come on. It was just like,
Can't wait to hear the next.
What's
Adele
that
album,
one
you know?
band that you loved? There was this. It was
like Atari Teenage
yeah,
Riot.
yeah. The sound, yeah. They had to kind of bring it back from
Yeah, it
Atari
was just like,
Teenage Riot.
jeez Louise, dude.
Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Oh, with another track that he had on the album, which again I heard sort of through the speakers, and it was the one with Sean from Boyz II Men.
Oh, yeah.
Is this the last track on the album? Right. So for me, it wasn't what I expected at all.
Right.
And by the way I'd heard it, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, I thought it had a sort of Trent Reznor-esque feel about it as well.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Hadn't heard that yet. Well, that song, I mean,
It wasn't what I expected from the guy from Boyz II Men. Anyway,
oh, no.
you know what I mean?
I think that
You got to hear it too. Like you got to
you
hear
gotta
it.
Yeah,
like
totally,
really
yeah.
listen to it. But that originally, that idea was this really sleepy, pretty kind of acoustic chord progression
Yeah.
that was just this beautiful melody. And I was listening to it and I'm like, I don't know, it just seemed too pretty or something.
Florally kind of thing, yeah.
So then I just took the root notes and I turned it into what basically is kind of like
Doom.
the punk band Black Flag made a record called My War
Yeah.
in like 1984.
Yeah.
And it's one of the darkest, most depressing sounding records you've ever heard. It's just like a dirge. It just sounds like a fucking funeral. So I took that beautiful chord progression and kind of played it as if it were like that Black Flag My War record. But then the chorus explodes into this thing that sounds like a choir.
Right, yeah.
And I thought like, okay, well, we'll build a choir. We'll just sing like it's 8-part harmony with 30 vocals and we'll have a choir. And the day that we were doing that song, I was in the parking lot working on the lyrics with my guitar, and here comes the guy Sean from Boyz II Men, and I recognized him.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey man, what's going on? You know, we started talking, and I think we'd met before, but I can't really remember. But he's the nicest guy in the world, and he'd come to see us play before, and he likes the band. And he said, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, we're making a record, but it was a secret. We hadn't told anybody. I'm like, we're making a record, and we're about to do this crazy song that I kind of want to build a choir on. And then I looked at him and said, do you want to sing on our record?
Wait a second, you were in Boyz II Men.
Yeah, you know
guys
how to do
sing
this.
a lot,
And
don't
he
you?
was like, yeah, are you kidding? I said, no. He was like, yeah, sure. And I said, well, okay, you want to hear the song? He goes, yeah. He was there to do a doo-wop thing or something. And he said, well, I got to do this thing. I'll be in an hour. And it comes in, and I was really nervous to play it for him because it's so fucking heavy.
Yeah.
And we play it for him, and he's like, okay, what do you want me to do? And I told him, he said, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk in. He goes, I'm going to build a triad, which I didn't even know what that meant. And then I'm going to do a wandering track, and I didn't know what that meant either. And he goes, and then I'm going to harmonize on the wandering track and all this shit. And so he goes in, and he, like, the tone of his voice and the control and I just never seen anyone do that before.
Yeah.
It was so beautiful. And we stacked like 24 vocals. And it was maybe the third or fourth song that we recorded. We were only like a month into recording. And when we were done, he walked out of the room and I said to everybody, like, the whole album has to sound like this.
Yeah.
Okay? Because this will be the last song. But the whole album has to sound this huge. So we started doing that on every fucking song. Like, I'm not kidding. Every song has these crazy background vocal pads that are like 5, 6, 7-part harmonies, but stacked with like 30 vocals. Wow. And so
that's where Greg really.
Yeah, that's where he stepped up.
Yeah.
Basically, we'd finish a track, and Dave would do a vocal, maybe a background vocal or something, and then him and Greg would go into the control or into the live room, and Greg would sit at a piano, and they'd listen to the track. And because Greg's jazz training, he knows every version of one chord, and there's more than one. There's like a lot of them that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
And he would kind of give Dave a couple piano notes, and Dave would do it. So that's kind of weird, okay, and then he'd do it again. Because I would sit in the control room half the time when he was doing it, listening to him do it.
Yeah.
And he'd do that, 4 times. He'd go, okay, we got 4 of them. Let's do the next one. And then you'd walk in there, and next thing, our Foo Fighter rock song turned into,
Yeah.
Like
night at
10cc, yeah.
night at the opera, 10cc.
Well, I was going to mention Night at the Opera too, another great
whatever.
example of multi-track.
I mean that's and Beatles. I mean the Beatles started doing that with Because and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean it's a thing that's been around, but I think because of Greg's jazz chordal training or whatever, it gave that. If we would have just tried to do that ourselves, probably would have been different. Yeah. A lot different.
Let's talk about the new single as well, which was based on you looking up at the sky and realizing that we're part of a community. Did you say you had UFO dreams as well?
Yeah, ever since I was a kid, I was like a UFO nut when I was a kid.
Because I've been having weird UFO dreams, man, and it's just the weirdest shit.
You know what actually the craziest thing, there was once when, God, this is ages ago, this is 18 years ago or something, we were here playing on one of those big day out tours. And I was dating this girl who was really into like seeing psychics and that kind of stuff. And this friend of ours that lived here, who was the promoter, this guy Steve Pavlovich, he knew of this woman, this French woman that lived outside of Sydney that was like the real deal, right? She could like read minds, and she was this crazy psycho. Right? So he's like, my girlfriend went to go see her, right? So me and Steve and my girlfriend drive out there, and we drop her off, and it's this little apartment just outside of town. And we leave her there for like an hour, and we came back to pick her up. And this woman who didn't speak English, she spoke French, and my girlfriend spoke French. She goes, wait, let me talk to you. And I sit down, and she says, it's being translated through my girlfriend. She says, give me your hands. And so I'm holding her hands, and she's looking at my hands, and she goes, you have a lot of power. And I'm like, really? It's just like, yeah, there's so much power, like from your hands, like psychic power or something. I'm like, whoa. And she said, can you see ghosts and things? And I said, no, I've never really seen ghosts. And she goes, do you see like things in the sky? And I said, well, I've always like dreamed of UFOs and things in the skies. And she said, those aren't dreams. She said, those are not dreams. Like you've experienced these things like in your life. And I'm just like, holy shit.
You're the one.
And then she gave me this amazing glowing like and I'd never sat with a psychic before. And then afterwards I said, after he had just given Melissa this terrible psychic thing that was like, yeah, that guy that you're dating, it's not going to last.
I'm glad she didn't say you're the one.
But yeah, I mean, the song and the video, like it has a lot to do. The video is based on those dreams that I've had before.
Yeah.
And
they seem so real. I've had them too, man. I'm telling
it's crazy, man.
It is. It's just the weirdest.
And the song is sort of the same, where there's this Neil deGrasse Tyson video thing that you can watch on YouTube. It's called The Most Astounding Truth, where he's asked by an interview, what's the most astounding truth? And he basically talks about the universe and how it was created and how, the atoms that comprise human life have actually been scattered throughout the universe for billions of years from stars imploding and things.
Billions and billions.
Yeah, so the atoms that make up life on this planet are the same as the atoms.
Of course,
right. And so there's this connectivity in life, and so that's basically
hence what TM is about as well.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
The aliens are going to come here and their first words will be not take me to your leader, be take me to Dave. Let me ask you about a few things that I want to just cover on this show that we're doing as well. We've got some anniversaries coming up. You had Paul McCartney, of course, playing on the album as well. We're going to play Live and Let Die. Can you just tell me about the McCartney connection?
Well, we met when at the Royal Albert Hall when they had the concert for George. It was a year after George Harrison passed away, and they did this tribute concert at Royal Albert Hall. And we met Danny Harrison, George's son. He came to one of our shows, and then he said, yeah, come on out to this Royal Albert Hall thing. And it was amazing. It was an incredible night of crazy performances.
Well documented night. I think there's a DVD.
Yeah, they made
it was a pretty famous concert. Yeah.
But anyway, so we met Paul there, and of course, it was a life-changing experience because we all grew up listening to the Beatles, and that's how I learned how to play music. And so then we made friends, we jammed with them, and then jammed with him on the Grammys and played with him in Liverpool, and he was in the Sound City movie, and we've just been friends over the years. And we came up with this idea, like, wow, man, we've got this song that Taylor's singing. I was going to play drums on it, but we thought, let's see if Paul will play drums, because he's played drums on so many.
He played drums, I think, on a track with the Wings track, Live and Let Die.
Yeah.
He played
drums. He played on the entire Band on the Run record.
Yeah,
oh, really?
That's him on the entire record.
I didn't know that.
So we just asked, and he's up for it,
Yeah.
And he's a great drummer.
Absolutely.
It's crazy. Like, when he was playing the drums, you instantly, the second he sat down and started playing, you're like, oh my God, I've heard that drum fill before.
Yeah.
Like, that sounds like, it sounds like a Beatles song, or it sounds like a Wings song.
Yeah.
It's also so evident that him and Ringo kind of learned music together. As you do when you're you could, his feel is just timeless.
Well, the other anniversary we've got coming up is the anniversary of the death of Keith Moon as well. We're going to play Won't Get Fooled Again. Again, one of the great unorthodox drummers as well.
Yeah.
Poetic.
It's cool. Drummers that are really lyrical and musical, like Mick Fleetwood is another good example. Like, those guys, when they play the drums, it's not as... It almost sounds like the way that they would tell a story, or the way they would tell a joke. And those drummers are like some of my favorite drummers. They might not be technically the most proficient, or they might not seem like rudimentally schooled or whatever, but when they play, Stuart Copeland is another great example.
Oh, the Sparsity, the Rumblefish soundtrack.
And you hear like 10 seconds of them playing, and you
know immediately who
absolutely know who it is.
Oh, yeah.
Can I ask you about one more thing, and then we'll move on to the other stuff? That would be the anniversary of the birthday of Freddie Mercury as well, who would have been 71 on September 5. Your thoughts on...
That's weird.
God, I just wish he was still here.
I know.
I'd just love to know him. Yeah. I would love to go see him. I mean, that was the first concert I ever saw. 1982, Queen and Billy Squier, the Hot Space Tour.
Yeah. I heard the isolated vocals the other day of Under Pressure, and to hear him hit some of those notes is uncanny,
And it's not, and once again, it wasn't because he was he was technically amazingly perfect in so many ways, but he was a rock and roll singer.
He had the flamboyance too that you don't see.
He still sounded like it was from, as I liked, the garage,
Yeah.
Which rock music should be from the garage.
Well, they found the BBC sessions of some of the stuff that they did recently, and the early stuff has got sort of a big black feel to it. If you want to mention SST or something like that.
They were raw. They were scum. They were scummy when they first started.
In the best possible way.
Yeah.
So the other thing that you got going on, of course, is Cal Jam as well. That's going to be excellent. And there are rumours, although I'm not sure how much of this we can actually reveal, of an Australian tour coming up as well.
There are rumors of an Australian tour.
Why would we?
Why wouldn't you have an Australian tour if you were in town at the time?
What are we doing here?
Yeah, there you go.
We may play a show at some point,
but
we're not sure.
Yeah. Well, it depends on when it goes to where. Then we can go, the tour is coming up, so... Brilliant. Hey guys, thank you so much.
Thanks,
really
man.
appreciate your time.
Thank
It's
you.
been great talking music to you, and I'm really looking forward to the new album.
Man.
Thank you so much. Foo Fighters.